Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast. Each week, your host, Casey Hasten, Director of Recruiting at VIP, will bring you valuable insights from thought leaders, introduce you to incredible companies, and bring you tips for landing your dream job from our team of executive recruiters at VIP. And now, Casey Hasten.
Welcome to the We Are VIP podcast, a podcast devoted to adding value to your career and candidate search, brought to you by VIP. I'm your host, Casey Hasten. I'm an executive recruiter, director of recruiting with VIP, and your all-around hiring guru. And you know it is my absolute delight to each week bring you some amazing people who are going to give you tips and tricks and just ideas on how to live your best life by living your best career. So today I have a very special guest with me. I'd like to welcome Bridget Cook-Burch, international speaker and trainer with Your Inspired Story. Bridget and her team guide you through the process of writing and creating a best-selling book. Her and her team help writers create a memoir, an autobiography, a principle-based book, fantasy-themed book, or any creative project your passion leads you to write. Where were you when I needed you? Along with writing, they provide assistance to navigate self-publishing, traditional, and hybrid publishing. They also have a finger on the pulse of film and documentary work as well. Bridget, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you for having me on.
So we were just talking before we got on, speaking of the fantasy-based, you just recently released an international bestseller.
Yes, written by Hannah Rose Lyon, and it's called The Rebel in Violet.
Oh,
And so it launched yesterday and hit international bestseller this morning. So we couldn't be more tickled.
oh my goodness. So when you do something like that, and you launch this book, what do you do to promote it so that, like, how would I know to find this? How do I know to help you make it a bestseller?
Well, thank you. Part of it is we have a really large multi-million people reach, which is wonderful. We utilize all the social media that is possible, and we work with the author on the platforms that they're also very active on. So they're already working with their avatar, and have quite a reach. And then we make sure that we really blast it out. We have press releases, and we know how to work with the Amazon algorithms throughout the United States and internationally, which is really nice. Not everybody has the ability to do that. We're really grateful that our teams can.
I think that's absolutely amazing. And I know I kind of made a little dig in my intro. I'm like, where were you when I needed you, But you know what? I've just published a book myself, but I feel like there's more in there. I think there's more. And so we may be talking more about that soon.
Oh, that'll be great. I can't wait to hear more, Casey.
I need somebody to drag it out of me, though, because I don't know what I want to say, but I know I've got a lot to say,
Oh, yes. And I've been doing that for a number of years. So I'm a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author, and I have been co-authoring with some pretty incredible guests over the last 10 or 15 years. And it's been a beautiful ride because my subjects have been on Oprah and Dr. Phil and CNN and 2020 and Good Morning America, People Magazine, all kinds of things. But sometimes the people with the most extraordinary stories don't necessarily know how to put it on the page. And so I love being able to coach and mentor and also co-author. And sometimes I ghostwrite, not very often, but sometimes I do for particular people. And it's really fun for Olympians and rock stars and others that are really creating social change. Those are my favorite topics and favorite books.
Oh, I have somebody to introduce you to then, if you want to do the social change thing after we get done here.
Okay.
Well, I also like to start our podcast with how did we get connected? Because I think it's so important that you establish that every connection along the way matters, right? And it's just, in fact, I'll tell you a quick story because you love stories, right?
You love stories. I'm ready.
So I was introduced to a gentleman that was having a career crisis, and that's what I do. I'm a career coach, right? But his was really different, and I don't know how to explain how it was different. But at the end of the day, we went through the assessment. We looked at how he was wired internally. We did all that. And he just starts talking. He starts telling me what he wants to do. And he's not really an entrepreneur, even though he's been an entrepreneur. So I wouldn't call him a serial. He's not wired that way, right? And he ended up, as he was talking, finally, a connection kind of went click, click, click in place. And so I was like, I think I know who to call about this. And because we decided he needed to buy into a company, not start a new company. And so I made a couple of phone calls, and this is all from this morning meeting to right before I walked into the studio. We've now got a meeting for him with the company that's doing exactly what he wants to do, where he can possibly have an equity interest in it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
Congratulations for you and for him.
Yes.
That's a wonderful thing to be able to provide.
But it's all about connections and knowing, where to use them and when to use them, and also having that value built up within your network too, right? So that I could go and make that ask and say, hey, what do you think about this?
I would agree. Those networks are really invaluable. And you're absolutely connected, which is so amazing. We met through Leadership Global initially, and then Casey, I must have heard from 5 or 6 people since that time of just how incredible you are and how
Aw.
incredibly connected you are. So that's quite a talent. I love it when people are constantly thinking of how can I mix this person with this situation and create a beautiful win-win outcome. So that's a lovely skill set to have.
It is. And I tell people all the time, it's like my superpower, because it's just like, it's like a tumbler in my brain, like a lock. It's like I start talking to people, then I'm like, click, 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 this person. It's weird. It's so weird. So, but anyway, so we're here to talk about you today. And I did want to say, like, Leadership Global is how we got connected, but more specifically, Karen Gray, my friend
Yeah.
and my chief of staff for Success North Dallas, was the one that finally put all the pieces together. So I'm very grateful to her for having introduced us, because we had such a fabulous conversation the other day, for sure.
Absolutely. And Karen knocks my socks off. She's got one of the most brilliant minds and beautiful hearts I've ever met. So I'm glad you're
Yes,
giving her kudos because that's due.
absolutely. So, okay. So Bridget, tell me about yourself and how you became a mentor with your inspired story.
Well, I always wanted to be a writer when I was growing up, but I kind of thought that that was one of those things that would never pay the bills and that, you wouldn't be able to do much with it. And I had a mom who'd been a teacher and my father was this engineer. And so I felt like I had to do something a little more straight-laced. So I went to school in political science and history, public relations, and public administration with Russian, and thought that I would be doing something perhaps in Washington, D.C. and become an envoy. But I always loved to write. And at the end of the day, I was a huge reader like you are. And so it was like this deep, deep desire. And then I had a near death experience in college, and there was such an extraordinary situation that took place. Like I was literally dying, and I'm listening to nurses outside in the corridor, and they're saying, she's not going to make it
Mm.
until morning. And I was given a second chance at life, which I absolutely did not take for granted. And so when I got out of the hospital, there was an extraordinary change that had taken place inside of me. And one of those things was I no longer had a fear of people. Like I could have a
Mm.
conversation with anyone on the planet, and it was like I could see the potential inside of them. I also had the ability to see stories. Like my clients call me the book whisperer because people can tell me their story and I start to see the threads and how they line up and how they could be an incredible story, like really consumable, and not just consumable, I call it juicy and delicious, where a reader can't put your book down and then they want to follow you and then they want to be part of the movement that you're creating. And so I started to be on fire and still was working and doing other things, but the writing, I kept having more and more opportunities to do that
Mm.
work. And then one night in the middle of the night I had a dream about a former skinhead who changed his life, and he was teaching kids to stay out of gangs. And I thought I had the makings of the most incredible fictional novel. Then I went to do some research because I had worked with gang kids in Denver, but they were Bloods and Crips and the Westra Familia and many others. And I had never worked with skinheads. After a year of research, I come across this guy's website. Everything he had written about in his biography on his website and what I had written about in my fictional novel were in tandem. And I
What?
realized the hero of my story was real. And then on another page of his website, he's like, "Oh, by the way, I'm looking for someone to write my life story. Could you give me, a call?" And I thought, this guy will think I am a fruitcake. And but I called him and let him know what had happened, and eventually we were able to work together to get his first book, my first book, out. And there were two amazing things that happened from that. One was a tragic thing when he had a stroke and he was no longer able to speak. And he has a
Mm,
powerful story. So the book became his voice. And
mm,
I'll never forget that. The second thing is that a woman read his story and then she reached out to me and she said, I think if someone could take a story of so much darkness and create something of hope and healing, that would be you. And then she said, "I'm the daughter of the happy face serial killer. Would you write my story?"
whoa, that just
And
gave me chills.
right. And I was blown away because I'm like, how would you ever write a story of hope and healing from a serial killer's daughter's perspective? And yet she's so incredible and the content just poured out and came. And it took us a year, but it was amazing. And pretty soon, she's on Oprah, Dr. Phil, all these things that are happening. Many of my clients have been on Dateline and New York Times and other things. But what was beautiful was I began to see the hero's journey without even knowing what it was. And then I
Mm,
became later introduced to Joseph Campbell and what Hollywood has done. But I'm like, I'm seeing this firsthand. Like I explored this and saw this within these incredible people before I ever saw the Hollywood version and recognize, oh my gosh, we all have an epic story. Not just, you've heard everybody's got a story. It's true, but everyone has an epic story. And really adventurous people are oftentimes on 2 or 3 heroes' journeys in their lifetime, depending on what they're going to face and what they're going to
mm.
do with what they do face, who the villains are, if it's cancer or divorce or a serial killer or whatever it might be. But there are patterns, and what makes it different is how we all function. Like you could have 25 people in the room and have the same topic of conversation, and they would all write a different story. And that's what I fell in love with, the human soul, and I just have never stopped. So I couldn't write everybody's stories. Like after my second book came out on Oprah, I had more than 200 people ask if I would write their stories. And I was like, I got to refer them somewhere. There wasn't anywhere where they were taking care of them like I would. So I developed my Inspired Writers Retreat and I developed some coaching programs. And now I work with dozens and dozens of authors a year, and hundreds of people come through my programs every year. And it just tickles me to see these people who are taking off in their careers and their lives. Because when you have a book, instant credibility, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you can utilize it effectively, it really becomes an incredible platform for up leveling your career in a dramatic way. So every day I am so excited to get up and to work with people on their stories. That's how I became a mentor, and I think I'll be doing this till I'm 140.
That sounds like an amazing place to be in. And I almost said job, but I don't feel like it's a job for you. I feel like it's
Mm.
you get paid for it, but you love what you do so much. And that's really when I come on this podcast and I bring guests on this podcast, that's really what I want people to understand, that you don't have to separate your life and your work because work, got to go to work. It's Monday. I don't want it to be like that for people because I know it's not like that for you. It's not like that for me. I can't wait to go to work on Monday. In fact, I usually don't stop working Saturday and Sunday because I love what I do and I love helping people. So, how do you approach your clients who struggle with understanding or identifying their own story, especially when one of your main priorities is helping them take ownership of it? So, how do you help them?
Well, usually I find most people will not take ownership if there's something that hasn't been healed, or
Mm,
if there is an area in which they lack confidence. And everybody experiences imposter syndrome at one point in time or another. But it's interesting, we can experience that and still show up. But if it's like splayed out on paper for everyone to see, sometimes that gets really debilitating for people. So I find two things is number one, to get more precise on how epic their life story really is. And it doesn't mean that you aggrandize or pretend or bring fiction into your nonfiction story. It means that whatever your story is, that you see it for the truth of how powerful it is. And that you make sure that the language reflects the power of that internal processing, the inner battles as well as the outer battles, and the ability to overcome. It's amazing. You'll watch people when they first get moving on their story to where their story's getting ready to come out. And of course there's still nerves and everything else, but they are a different person, same person, but a more significant level of confidence. And I want to be clear too that it's not the expensive business card that you could get done in 30 days. That book will still help anyone.
hmm
And, to have a better level of confidence and to be a writer and say, I did this thing, because 9 out of 10 people want to write a book, less than 3% ever get it done. And so if you have a book, as you have, it takes something from you to be able to get it to completion. But if you can do it in what I call a legacy manner, where you say, not only am I going to do this book for myself, but I'm also going to create something of so much value for another person. So much value that 50 years from now, it's still affecting people and can touch someone halfway around the world to make better decisions. Then you have something really worthy, and it changes people. So I love not the expensive business cards, but I love a true legacy story.
I think about the first book that comes to mind and maybe you have a different book that comes to mind. One that does stand the test of time is Think and Grow Rich. Whether you like it or not, that book has stood. How old is that book? 80 years old?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. And it's still a number one best-selling professional business book.
Mhm.
That's crazy. I want a legacy like that.
Right? I have some people that are working on legacy books just like that right now, and that's their clear intention is to have a book that stands the test of time like that.
I love
And
that.
and right now I think they're going to be able to do that.
That is so amazing. Okay, so selling your story is also an extremely important part of the interview process. And I feel like, everything that you do to help draw that story out, to tell that epic journey, I think that certain parts of that are absolutely applicable to a job seeker during the interview process. So, what advice do you have for a job seeker when it comes to telling and selling?
Well, it's interesting. Warren Buffett, one of the things he says is if you want to be worth 6 times more, to grow your worth 6 times more in your lifetime, understand how to express yourself in person and on paper. And so, of
Mm,
course, in a job interview, that's exactly what you're doing. And one of the things that I think is important is, sometimes people, they want to show up as so confident, and then it can come across as arrogant. But if you're aware of what your rises and falls are in storytelling, we say every villain has redeeming qualities, and every hero or shero has fatal flaws. So if
mm,
you're open and honest about your fatal flaws and you show how you overcame that, suddenly the person who is doing the interview says, I got a persistent one. I've got a fighter. I've got someone with grit and tenacity. I've got a problem solver. I've got someone that loves to get things done. And suddenly here's this beautiful candidate instead of someone that, comes across as, oh yeah, I can tackle anything you give me. And they're
mm.
like, "Oh, I'm not sure if I believe you." But if you give them an example, then they're suddenly like, yeah, I think you could do this job. So that would be my main thing is to express yourself with confidence and not be afraid of the vulnerable, as well as the powerful aspects of you, because it's all power. Vulnerability is great power.
I love that. And one of the piece of advice that I usually give my candidates, and I've probably said it on here 100 times, but I'll say it again because it's worth repeating, is, there's that icebreaker question, right? When you first go into, tell me a little bit about yourself, right? And so I encourage my candidates to really make this, instead of an icebreaker question, a standout question, because this is the first, usually one of the first questions they ask, and this is going to set the tone for the rest of the interview. And I have them craft their answer like a commercial, short and sweet, but it has a hook. And so what I have them do is I have them take something from their resume. Don't read it verbatim because they've already looked at your resume, right? But take something and tell a story about it. Bring it to life. And that's how you answer the tell me a little bit about yourself question.
And I love how you said, bring it to life. This is one of the things that storytelling can do that nothing else on the planet really compares to. Is I'm going to tell you a story. Like you told us a story when we first got started on the podcast, and I know more about you and your skill sets and how you love to create wins for amusing people. And so, yeah, you're already one of my favorites.
We're going to talk more after this, I promise you, because I have got so many questions for you. So as a motivational speaker, which is I'm aspiring to be one myself, you've delivered powerful messages to diverse audiences. How do you tailor your talks to resonate with the different groups, and what techniques do you use to engage? What techniques do you use to engage and inspire your listeners?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important is to get to know your audience and to have an understanding. So anytime someone is really good at motivational, inspirational, educational, and transformational speeches is when they have a really powerful speech that is meant to metamorphosize the audience, right? That they go from point A to point B, and at the end of the day, they walk out of there thinking differently about themselves and their opportunities for life. And so, well, if you have a group of stay-at-home moms, or if you have a group of incredible neurosurgeons, and if you have a group of networkers and, in business, those are different audiences that will have different needs. So the thing that I always invite my speakers to do is ask whoever is asking you to be the keynote, what are the 3 greatest needs? Not the 3 greatest lessons you think they need or anything like that. What are the 3 greatest needs of your audience that's going to be sitting there today? And then you tailor your speech to make sure that you're speaking not just to the head, but to the heart as well. And it can be really impactful, incredibly impactful, and they know you're speaking to them instead of to everybody.
Yeah, and I keep relating this back to interviews because most of our audience are either job seekers or maybe looking to, build that next better career. And one of the things we try to do, one of the great reasons to have a recruiter is that we know both sides of the story, right? We know the client who's hiring, we know the candidate who's going to interview. And it's our job to prepare that candidate with as much information. So to your point, to know their audience, who they're going to be talking to, so that they can adjust their language accordingly. And not that I want them to pretend to be something they're not, but there's a lot of truth to be said in mirroring the person that you're talking to and knowing what to expect. And also, another reason we want to do that is because what if, this type of personality, let's just say it's a type A personality, you don't work well with somebody that micromanages, somebody that does all that. And so we don't want to waste anybody's time. So by getting that story ahead of time, we can be most efficient with helping our clients to find their next good talent.
That's beautiful. And, language is about relatability and connection and approachability. And I like how you said, if this is not a good fit, that is really quick and doesn't waste anyone's time. Sometimes, our story is not meant for everyone. Like we want everyone to buy our book. We want everyone to hire us. We want all of those things. That's a natural human instinct to really want to be majorly significant. It's a human need. The thing is that there are certain places and readers and audiences and corporations where you are really going to shine. And I think it's wonderful that you're helping to connect people in their magnificence so that they have an enjoyable career and are making good money and are able to be such a gift, a contribution to that corporation, and that it's a win-win instead of win-lose. So language is important in that.
It's so important. And I just, ultimately my goal in recruiting is I just want everybody to enjoy going to work like I do. I don't want anybody to hate their life because I put them in a job that they're going to hate.
Right.
So
good for you.
That's important to me. Very important. So in your opinion, what are the key skills or qualities that are important for success as an author?
Well, I think number one is having courage to expose yourself and be vulnerable, courage to tell a really good story that resonates, if I may say it on this podcast, that resonates with your soul. Like it's just all the way core to who you are. And then not be afraid to share it and to speak it and to tell it. Visibility is important because if you're not willing to be visible, then no one knows about your incredible book and no one will buy your incredible book and no one will be able to be touched by that incredible message. So visibility is really important for success. And it's not just on social media, it's like all areas of your life, but social media and media is also very important for an author. Just, dare to be seen.
That is perfect. I think we are going to wrap it up and go to our VIP questions on that. Dare to be seen. And you know what? And we just had a very similar message at, not just dare to be seen, show up to be seen. That was at a women's event. That was the message. You got to show up. You got to show up for your fellow woman. You got to show up for everybody else that's in the room, not just for you.
Yeah.
So.
I love that. And you're outward focused. And I will hinge on something that you just said with that, is that the people I have found are most successful with their stories are the ones who have chosen to be of service. Like, who can I help with my message? And how can I narrow in? And the ones who are most successful are the ones who say, if I can touch and reach one person, then I'll know I have done what needs to be done with this story. And then they usually end up reaching hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions. So it's a wonderful thing to serve.
Okay. Now we're going to end it on that note. I like that one better. So, okay. But before we go, I'm going to ask you our VIP questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. If you were chosen to be one of the first colonists on Mars, what 3 things or people would you bring with you?
So I had to laugh at that one, okay? Because I started thinking about this one. I did get a heads up on this question, and I started to write a novel. It was the funniest thing. So I'm like, and then what if this? And then what if this? And so that became a really fun question. But I will tell you, I would want to have survival, right? So I'd have to have a really great scientist, and there is a woman expert scientist. Her name is Nadini Haraneth. And she would be number one because then I would know that we'd be able to survive because she studied it so well. And then we'd have to have someone that was very mechanical and could fix anything. And I would have to have someone that I love, and that happens to be one person, which would be my husband, because he can fix anything.
Nice.
And he's building his own airplane, so he could do some really dramatic, wonderful things on there. And then the last is I would have to have a sense of humor if we were the first 3